I was smiling across the table when he called me stupid in Spanish and laughed into his wine, completely sure I couldn't understand a single word. The restaurant was loud, candles flickering, plates clinking, and there I was, his quiet girlfriend, nodding politely, playing the role he loved. Mark always said my silence was cute. That night, he leaned back in his chair, switched to Spanish, and said something to the waiter. Then, still in Spanish, he looked straight at me and joked about how easy it was to date someone pretty but empty-headed. His friend chuckled. My smile didn't move. What he didn't know was that my mother raised me speaking Spanish at home. What he didn't know was that every word landed sharp and clear. And what he definitely didn't know was that the moment he said it, something inside me went completely still. I didn't confront him. I didn't flinch. I just listened. On the walk home, he wrapped an arm around my shoulders, kissed my temple, and asked if I had a nice night. I said yes. That answer cost me nothing. I was already planning. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention. He mocked my job to his friends when he thought I wasn't paying attention. He joked in Spanish about how I was temporary, how he'd eventually find someone more on his level. Each time, I smiled. Each time, I remembered. Mark worked in marketing. He loved to brag about how sharp he was, how people underestimated him. He especially loved that I looked up to him. So when he asked if I could help him prep for a big pitch to a Spanish-speaking client, just basic stuff, organizing slides, I agreed. I told him my Spanish was rusty, but I'd try. He laughed and said, "See, cute." I helped him polish the presentation. I corrected grammar he thought was flawless. I rewrote phrases subtly. I never made them wrong, just slightly off. Not enough to raise alarms. Enough to sound unprofessional to someone fluent. The night before the pitch, we went out to dinner again. Same restaurant. Same candles. This time, he drank more. And again, he slipped into Spanish, telling the waiter that I was sweet but clueless, that I probably thought Spanish was just fast Italian. He laughed. I smiled. Inside, my hands were steady. The next morning, he left confident. He didn't kiss me goodbye. 3 hours later, he called. His voice was tight, controlled, embarrassed. The client had asked questions. In Spanish. His responses landed wrong. Not disastrously wrong. Just enough to make him sound like he didn't really understand the market he claimed to know. The room had gone quiet. The deal was postponed. They said they'd get back to me, he muttered. I told him I was sorry. I meant it, for the man he thought he was. That evening, he invited friends over, desperate to reclaim his ego. Wine flowed, laughter returned, and then, like he always did, he switched to Spanish again. This time, he complained about the client, about foreigners being too sensitive, about how his girlfriend wouldn't get it anyway. I put my glass down gently. In perfect, calm Spanish, I said, "You should be careful." They weren't confused. They were offended. Your phrasing implied their culture was outdated. The room went silent. Mark stared at me like I had just stood up from a wheelchair and run. You speak Spanish." "I always have," I said, still calm. "I've understood every word you've said about me. At dinner, with your friends. Tonight." His face drained of color. Someone coughed. Another friend suddenly remembered an urgent appointment. He tried to laugh it off. You're joking. I didn't smile this time. No. But you were. Every time you called me stupid. Temporary. Easy. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time since I met him, Mark had nothing ready. I picked up my bag. By the way, I added, those slides. The client noticed. They didn't say it directly, but they noticed. Realization hit him slowly, painfully. Not rage. Not shouting. Just the understanding that he had underestimated the wrong person. I didn't storm out. I didn't cry. I walked out the same way I had walked in. Quiet, composed, invisible to him now in a different way. Weeks later, I heard through mutual friends that the deal never came back. His confidence took a hit. He stopped joking in Spanish. Stopped assuming silence meant ignorance. As for me, I stopped smiling when I wasn't amused, and that felt like the real revenge. Months passed, and the quiet after leaving him was louder than any argument we never had. Mark tried to reach out at first. Casual texts. A late night. You awake. A weak apology wrapped in jokes, like everything else he ever said. He told me he felt confused, that he never meant harm, that I should have told him earlier. I never replied. Silence was the only language he hadn't practiced. Then the real consequences started showing up. A mutual friend told me Mark lost another account, not because of bad luck, but because someone on the client's side spoke Spanish fluently and remembered him. Apparently, reputation travels faster than excuses. He stopped bragging online. His confidence posts turned into vague quotes about betrayal and people hiding who they really are. I recognized myself in every one of them, and it didn't sting. It confirmed everything. One evening, I ran into him unexpectedly at a grocery store. Same smile, thinner now. Same posture, slightly hunched. He looked at me like he was hoping I'd translate his regret into forgiveness. You never told me, he said, blocking the aisle, voice low. I never had to, I replied. He laughed nervously and said, you know, if you'd just spoken up, we could have worked through it. I looked at him then, really looked, and realized he still didn't get it. He thought the problem was the language. He thought the betrayal was a misunderstanding. No, I said softly. You didn't lose me because I understood Spanish. You lost me because you thought respect was optional. When someone stayed quiet. That landed harder than any insult ever could. He stepped aside. I walked past him, cartwheels squeaking, heart steady. Later that night, I cooked dinner alone. Music playing, phone face down. No tension in my shoulders, no need to smile at the wrong moments. I spoke Spanish out loud to myself, laughing at a joke he'd never understand, not because of the words, but because of the freedom behind them. I realized something then. Revenge doesn't always look like a dramatic reveal or a ruined career. Sometimes it's letting someone finally see you clearly, right before you leave their life for good. He thought I was just smiling. I was listening. And I chose exactly when to stop. Even after that, his name kept finding ways to circle back into my life. Not directly. Never brave enough for that. It came through people, through stories, through small updates that felt like echoes of a lesson he was still failing to learn. Someone told me he started dating a woman who spoke fluent Spanish and made him feel insecure. Another said He now asked coworkers to repeat jokes in English, just to be safe. That part almost made me laugh. Almost. One night months later, he finally sent a long message. No jokes this time. No emojis. Just paragraphs. He admitted he liked feeling superior. That my quietness made him feel bigger. That speaking over me, about me, had been his way of staying in control. He said losing me forced him to see himself without the performance. I read it once. Then I deleted it. Not out of anger. Out of closure. Because the truth was, my revenge had already finished its work. I didn't need him humbled forever. I didn't need his life ruined. I just needed him to remember me every time he assumed silence meant ignorance. Every time he thought someone smiling wasn't paying attention. Every time he almost made the same mistake and stopped himself. That memory would do the job better than I ever could. I moved on quietly. New apartment. New routines. New people who asked instead of assuming. One evening, at another dinner table, someone switched to Spanish mid-conversation, thinking they were being clever. I didn't interrupt. I waited. I listened. Then I joined in naturally, fluently, watching the surprise flicker across their face. This time, the smile I wore was real. Because I finally understood something Mark never did. Power doesn't announce itself. It observes. It waits. It chooses its moment. And sometimes, the most satisfying revenge isn't proving how much you know. It's knowing exactly when to walk away and letting them realize, far too late, who they were talking about all along. Years later, I barely remembered the sound of his voice, but I still remembered the feeling. That tight, patient calm. The moment when you realize someone has underestimated you so completely that correcting them would be a waste. That kind of awareness stays with you. It sharpens you. I became more selective after him. Not colder, clearer. I listened more than I spoke. I noticed how people behaved when they thought no one was keeping score. How quickly respect slipped when they felt safe enough to be careless. And every time it happened, I thought of that dinner table. The candlelight. The laughter. The man who thought language was a shield. Once, at a work conference, I watched a senior executive whisper something dismissive in Spanish about a junior colleague presenting on stage. I waited until the Q&A. Then I asked a thoughtful question, in Spanish, building directly on the presenter's point. The room shifted. The executive froze. The presenter smiled like someone had just handed them oxygen. Afterward, the executive avoided me. The presenter thanked me. I told her nothing, just smiled. I didn't need credit anymore. That's the thing people like Mark never understand. You don't reveal yourself to win approval. You reveal yourself when it serves you. Until then, you observe. You gather information. You decide. I never heard from him again. But I'm certain of one thing. Every time he sits across from someone quiet. Every time a smile lingers too long. Every time a language switches and the room feels safe. He remembers me. Not because I ruined him. Not because I exposed him. But because I walked away holding the truth he never saw coming. He thought I was just smiling. I was listening. And that was enough. Time has a way of sanding the sharp edges off memories, but it never erases the lesson. I learned to trust my instincts after him. The subtle pauses. The jokes that land just a little wrong. The way some people test how much they can get away with before anyone pushes back. I stopped rushing to prove myself. I let people show me who they were first. And when they did, I believed them. Once, at a small dinner party, someone joked about background people. The ones who smile and nod and don't matter much. The table laughed. I didn't. I watched the speaker carefully. The confidence, the comfort, the assumption that no one would challenge him. It was familiar, almost nostalgic. Later that night, he asked what I did for work. When I told him, his tone changed. Respect slid into place like it had always been there. I smiled. Polite, distant. I'd seen the switch before. I knew what it meant. People think revenge has to be loud to be satisfying. They imagine raised voices, public humiliation, dramatic exits. But the most lasting kind is quieter. It changes the balance of power without announcing itself. It leaves someone alone with their own reflection. Mark never got another explanation from me. No final speech. No closure conversation. And that was intentional. Closure is a gift, and not everyone earns it. I heard once that he told someone I was the one that got away. That phrase made me pause, not because it flattered me, but because it revealed how little he still understood. I didn't get away. I chose to leave. There's a difference, and it matters. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that first dinner, the first insult I understood and didn't react to. That was the moment everything shifted. Not because he spoke in Spanish, but because I realized I didn't owe him access to my inner world. Listening taught me patience. Silence taught me timing. And walking away taught me my worth. If there's one thing I carry with me now, it's this: never underestimate the quiet ones. Not because they're hiding something, but because they're deciding something. He thought my smile meant ignorance. He thought my silence meant consent. He thought language gave him cover. He was wrong on all three. I was listening. I was choosing. And when the moment came, I didn't raise my voice. I simply left him with his words, and a memory he'll never quite escape. Even now, I sometimes catch myself smiling in moments of quiet, on purpose this time. Not the old smile that hid things. Not the polite one meant to keep the peace. This one comes from knowing I no longer shrink to fit someone else's comfort. It comes from knowing I don't have to correct people who are busy revealing themselves. Mark taught me something without ever meaning to. He showed me how dangerous assumptions can be. How quickly respect disappears when someone believes they're smarter, louder, or safer than the person across from them. He thought language made him powerful. He never realized character is what gives words their weight. I've watched people like him since then. Confident, charming, careless. And I've noticed how they always underestimate the same kind of person, the listener, the observer, the one who doesn't rush to speak. That used to be me without choice. Now it's me with intention. I don't correct every insult. I don't expose every lie. I don't fight every battle. I choose. Because patience isn't weakness when it's paired with awareness. Silence isn't surrender when it's deliberate. Somewhere out there, Mark is still talking. Still assuming. Still switching languages when he thinks it gives him an advantage. And every now and then, when someone smiles a little too calmly across the table, I know his chest tightens just a bit. Because once you realize a smile can be listening, you never feel as safe again. That's the kind of lesson that sticks. He thought I was just smiling. Not listening. Not understanding. Not remembering. He was wrong. And I never had to raise my voice to prove it. Eventually, the story stopped needing an ending because it started living on its own. I noticed it in small moments. In meetings where someone underestimated me and then recalculated too late. In conversations where people chose their words more carefully. Once they realized I wasn't rushing to fill the silence. In the way I no longer felt the urge to prove anything at all. That dinner with Mark wasn't the moment I was hurt. It was the moment I woke up. He thought the power was in the language he used. He thought control came from saying things others couldn't understand. He thought my smile meant safety, but power was never in his words. It was in my restraint, in my memory, in my timing. I let him believe his version of me because it served me to do so, right up until it didn't. And when that moment came, I didn't need drama. I didn't need witnesses. I just needed him to finally see the truth, with nowhere to hide from it. Some people fear being misunderstood. Others fear being exposed. Mark feared being seen by someone he thought was beneath him. And that fear followed him long after I was gone. As for me, I kept the habit that changed everything. I listen first. I watch longer than expected. And when I smile now, it's never empty. Because the quiet ones aren't quiet by accident. They're deciding. And once you've learned how to listen without being noticed, you never really lose that power again.